Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure for me to be addressing the conference of the Luxembourg Private Equity and Venture Capital Association being organized today. Unfortunately, I cannot be physically present as while you will be seeing this recording, I will be sitting in Parliament where the debates on the state of the nation are taking place. At the same time, are also taking place the debate on the budget and fiscal situation in Luxembourg. Let me reassure you, I would have loved to be with you, but obviously you realize that I have to be in Parliament answering questions. But I want to reassure you there's only good news coming from this exercise, as the Luxembourg budget situation is proving quite good. The budget deficit is reduced to nearly nothing, and we have a surplus in the public administration, thus consolidating our financial situation and consolidating the AAA that all rating agencies are giving to Luxembourg. There's only 10 countries left in the world with this AAA, and we're glad to be part of those 10 countries. I'm sure that you, as private equity managers, are appreciating this financial stability that we can guarantee through the good financial situation. Now let me turn to the conference that you're organizing today, which is called Financing the Real Economy. Well, what a beautiful subject and what a good choice. Then what we tend to forget sometimes is that banks and financial players, asset managers and equity funds are not a purpose in themselves, but they are really helping moving our economies forward. And I would like to dwell a little bit on two topics in this context. First is what Europe is doing, and second, what Luxembourg is doing in this context, in the context of fueling the real economy through an efficient financial center. At European level first, the European Commission has pushed the agenda of the Capital Markets Union in the last couple of months, and rightly so, because we have seen that financing the economy, and in particular the small and medium-sized companies, has proved more and more difficult in recent years. Why is that the case? Well, obviously because of the consequences of the economic and financial crisis of 2008, where we have gone from an under-regulation to maybe an over-regulation, as some would say. I don't want to decide that debate, but definitely the burden of regulation has become much higher for banks, and therefore credit is less available for companies, and in particular SMEs. Now, if we look what happened in the year 2017, one must say that 3 directives have been adopted during that year that are partly answering that challenge. Let me first mention the directive on securitization, where obviously we have been able to find a compromise, and I remember these discussions very well as they started in 2015 during the presidency of the European Union that Luxembourg had in the second part of the year. And I'm glad that today this directive, which introduces standardization in securitization, has been adopted and will be soon translated into national laws. That will obviously boost finance. The second directive which I like to mention is the one on the prospectus. That one is specifically dedicated to SMEs, because here the idea is to facilitate the access to the capital markets for small and medium-sized companies by reducing the burden of administration. I also have participated in the elaboration of that directive, as it was presented first during the presidency of Luxembourg, also back in 2015. A third directive has been adopted during 2017, which helps companies finance innovation, or help companies which are dealing with social impact. So these 3 directives together are improving the general framework for companies, and I'd like to highlight that, and I'm sure you will have the opportunity to discuss the potential of these 3 directives. At Luxembourg level? Well, we've done a lot. We do not rest on our laurels, and first I would like to underline that we have a very complete toolbox. Now, this toolbox is very well known to you. I don't need to dwell a lot on it. Let me nevertheless say that we have been the pioneers in UCITS funds that were created 30 years ago on the dot, because it was launched in 1988, and Luxembourg was the one country doing it first, anticipating all the others, and it's one of the initiatives that we took which ensured that we became a leader in the fund business worldwide, number 2 in the world after the United States. But after that, we have developed quite a few other instruments that you use probably on a regular basis, like the CCARs or like the special investment funds. More recently, we launched the reserved alternative investment funds, which has the latest addition to our toolbox for the investment fund industry. When I visited New York last week during the LPEA conference, I was confirmed in the fact that Luxembourg is now becoming very attractive for alternative investment funds, where we are really among the top nations, and the future lies with alternative investment funds, and I'm glad that we are so well positioned in this field. But the toolbox is a nice thing to have, but taxation is another issue that you probably look at very closely. Let me here underline 3 major messages that are important. First, general taxation, as from this year, 1st of January, the tax rate for corporations is 18%, down from 21% where it was 2 years ago. I think that's good news. Let me also underline that for small and medium-sized companies, the rate has been reduced to 15%. So this is an important element for startups and companies that you at the LPEA are fostering and following. There's 2 other initiatives that have been taken by the government in the field of taxation. The first one is the public, which was discussed in the public a lot and which went through Parliament recently. That's the intellectual property tax regime, which has passed Parliament a couple of weeks ago. The very good news is this intellectual property regime has received the green light from the OECD and the European Union just recently, last week. It means that our regime is compliant with the most recent regulations set up by the OECD in the BEPS context, which is the nexus approach. And the second legislative initiative, which was decided last December, is that we have now introduced in the Luxembourg legislation a tax credit when companies acquire software. And this will allow companies to prepare themselves for the future, for the digitalization of the economy. In other words, we want in the Rifkin process that our companies prepare themselves to be fit for the future, and this tax credit on acquisition of software will help them. Last but not least, let me mention that we've taken another initiative last January, which is now in front of Parliament, and I hope it will be voted before the end of the session, and that is green covered bonds that can be used for renewable energy. If or when this is going to be voted by Parliament, we will be the first country to have such a tool. As you see, we've been very active and created the right framework for you to prosper. Let me conclude by thanking the Luxembourg Private Equity and Venture Capital Association for its outstanding work, and the fact that the room in the Philharmonie is packed as it is proof of the success of this initiative and of the work that you do. I hope you will have a fruitful conference. Best wishes.